Hello, I'm Will Yeoman, and welcome to another episode of the Pod Well Travelled, where I'm joined today by Travel Editor Stephen Scourfield and Aviation Editor Geoffrey Thomas. Gentlemen, welcome back to the pod.
Thank you, Will.
Thank you.
Later on in the show, Penny Thomas is joining us. She's going to be telling us a little bit about the wine regions in and around Adelaide in South Australia, because she's going to have a wonderful piece in this weekend's West Australian travel section. But in the meantime, we're going to talk islands. We're also going to talk about Air Mauritius.
Yes.
So we'll get on to... Actually, let's talk about that now, shall we?
Yeah.
While we're talking to you, Geoffrey.
Yeah.
Well, what's the news?
Well, look, they start services Wednesday, today, coming in from Mauritius, twice weekly, coming back after a 2-year absence, and a real new gateway option into the islands of the Indian Ocean and South Africa, and also onto Paris and London. So some really interesting developments in that space. They've got the brand new A330 900 Neo, which is a far more advanced version of the A330 Airbus that Qantas has got, for instance. A real eco-friendly aeroplane, burning about 25% less fuel. Very comfortable interior. And the twice-weekly service connects with a daily service to Paris, 5 times weekly to London, which will be on the A350, which is another brand new aeroplane for them. A really beautiful bit of kit, that is. And then they've got a daily service to Johannesburg. I think it's 3 times a week to Cape Town.
Okay.
And then multiple services to Madagascar and Rodrigues and also Reunion Island. So there's some really interesting options, not only Mauritius itself, which is a magnificent, magical kind of place, a real good stopover option if you're going to Europe, and of course a great connection to South Africa.
And how are they price-wise?
Well, look, like all airlines at the moment, a little bit expensive in the near term, but into next year, very competitive. And prior to COVID, they were offering some amazing deals, both in economy and in business class through to Europe. So I expect that will return. Although there's going to be a little bit of pressure on that route, particularly if Qantas, well, as they've said, they're going to suspend their Johannesburg service at the end of March. Then Air Mauritius will be the only connection to, or the only real direct connection, if you like, to Johannesburg from here. So that there might be a bit of price pressure next year.
Okay. Stephen, Air Mauritius, not a lot not to like there.
No, it's always been such a good service out of Perth, because it's, through all sorts of things that have happened over the last 20 years, it's been a really reliable destination for us. It's an hour, 8 and a bit hours. It's a single flight, non-stop flight. So all of those things have made it a very good destination. Of course, the resorts there are pretty fabulous. And the resorts in Mauritius, it's always been quite interesting. It's been with the readers, it's been kind of interesting over many, many years to just convince them about Mauritius, because the pricing always looks a bit more, but they have this half board. So basically your meals are included, your dinner's included. But of course, absolutely beautiful resorts. And it's an interesting enough island,
And on that, one of the things they were talking to me about is the fact that with those resorts, so many of the additional things, the water sports, the snorkeling, all those, they're all included.
That's right. That's right.
So when you add up the dollar value,
that's exactly right.
It's great value.
Yeah, and we've always had the kind of barley ruler, that everything is measured against barley. Less so now. But so Mauritius always, we always sort of struggled with traction, with just telling readers, explain. We've always explained this value, but that never quite had the volume, perhaps.
Sure.
But I think it's been great. And as Geoffrey says, I mean, they used to put in some pretty good business fares via Mauritius to Paris, which is it's not a bad route for us. And with a stopover thrown in, that's pretty good.
And they code share, in fact, on 40 services of Air France's from Paris. So if you're going beyond Paris, then there's some seamless, relatively seamless travel onwards from Paris to 40 destinations.
But I think, as Geoffrey said, the issue that really comes up is this access into sub-Saharan Southern Africa, South Africa in particular. And as you mentioned, Botswana, Zambia. I mean, you can get in from Perth in Western Australia into Addis Ababa, for example, or into Ethiopia or Kenya via the Middle East is fine, and Singapore Airlines, of course, fly in there. But I think for Johannesburg in particular, and that as a hub, Air Mauritius will be, is such a great option, given that Qantas is, I mean, you can pretty much say that their restart to Johannesburg is shambolic at
It
best.
is.
I mean, in the first interim, because the border issues, which should have been considered before they announced the flight, they're going to bus people from one terminal to another terminal for months and months, and then stop the flight. I mean, it's just pretty well disgraceful.
It is a mess, unfortunately.
Yeah, so good old Air Mauritius.
Okay, well, going from one island to 3,500 islands.
Oh, yes. Oh,
This,
good. Good segue.
Yes, you see what I did there. Well, out today, as in right now, just out, Island Jewels, The Natural History of Western Australia's Islands by Ian Abbott and Andrew A. Burbidge. It's a very fine tome here. And look, okay, 3,500 islands sounds like a lot, and of course they're not all what we would think of as islands where you can go and visit and have a nice time with the wildlife and everything. However, even if there are only a few hundred of these that are visitable, that's still a lot more than what we would know. Most of us would know anyway.
But do they have a Rottnest bakery on them?
Well, that is the key question, isn't it? Do they have quokkas? That is the key question. But these guys, look, they've been around for a long time. They're naturalists and scientists, and they've probably got 100 years between them of experience, and they've been to a lot of islands, not just throughout this part of the world, but throughout the rest of the world, stayed on a lot of them, investigated a lot of the natural habitat, the history, and what they call changes in the biota. So what is causing the changes over a long period of time in these islands and so forth. So, okay, Stephen.
Well, that's very... Yes, sorry, mate.
I was going to say, how many of these islands have you been to? You're a very well-travelled man.
Probably quite a few. I mean, I was just thinking through because, Geoffrey, before we came on air, sort of said I thought there was just Rottnest, which is probably
well, it's a slight exaggeration.
Thank you,
but
Stephen. Yeah.
Well, given Geoffrey's limited knowledge, possibly not. No, there's Garden Island as well, Geoffrey.
Yes,
no, but if you
I
think
have been
of
there. Yeah.
the 1,000 islands of the Buccaneer Archipelago and the Kimberley,
Absolutely.
And the tide races coming through there, you get these 10, 11 metre tides. They're like whitewater rivers between them. So I spent a fair bit of time there. If you think of, one area for islands that we don't think of so much is out of Dampier, is the Pilbara coastal islands. A lot of which you can camp on and stay on. Out of Headland and Dampier. I suppose we think of that area as being industrial, but you can be a few kilometres off to the side around those islands, and it's just amazing.
And then you've got the magnificent islands off Esperance.
That's right. You've got the Recherche Archipelago.
Yes, all of which they cover here. I can just looking at the different sections. They start right at the top there with the tropical Ks. Now, in my ignorance, I didn't know what a K was, so I had to look it up. And I should have been fairly obvious.
Yes.
But shall we explain?
Please.
Just in case. It's basically,
it's just the letter K, or
it's CAY. K is like an island that's on a reef. Am I right? It's basically sand, but it's on a reef.
That's correct.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just a sand island.
Yeah, exactly right. So you can imagine there would be quite a lot of those along the West Australian coast.
Yep.
But these guys break it up. As I say, they start at the top. You got Kununurra, you got the Kimberley, the tropical Ks. Then you go down past Broome. The northwest offshore, then the northwest inshore, it's around Karratha, then down to Carnarvon. Chapter 6 is the Guta-Raguda. Do you know?
Yeah.
Or Guta-Raguda?
Yeah.
Can you explain what that is? Sorry, I'm displaying my ignorance.
You're looking at a sort of geographic area. I
Geographic area, yes.
suppose. Yeah,
okay.
that's interesting. They've called it that. That's the Carnarvon area,
Right. Do you think they're using the original indigenous names for some of these areas?
That's an interesting thing to do.
Yes.
And of course, just south of there is where it all comes together for me, which is the Houtman Abrolhos Islands.
Indeed.
Which of course we call the Abrolhos, but there is another set of Abrolhos Islands off South America.
Indeed, there is,
we
which is
call
why
these the
you
Howland
distinguish the two, yes.
But in terms of islands, for me, this is kind of the crux point, because the northern band of islands, if you like, the tropical islands and the coral spawn, that's associated with those from the Raleigh Shoals and so on down. Kind of at the end of its range is pretty much the Abrolhos Islands. And then the southern range, which includes all those islands we talked about, Os Esperance and, the Tamala limestone coast islands up to Rottnest and so on and through Jurien. The sort of cold water comes as far as the Abrolhos Islands.
Yes.
So that's where you get this weird mix. So the Abrolhos is kind of the crossroads of all our islands as well. Very like the Galapagos is.
Indeed. I mean, I'm just looking at the chapter that devoted quite a bit of space to the
you've got coral
Abrolhos.
and cold water species like the Australian sea lion. And to see Australian sea lions swimming over coral is kind of weird, because it can only happen in an overlap like that. Then you've got the very deep water, out 3 kilometres deep canyons just to the west of it, and shallow water between the Abrolhos and Geraldton, of course. So you get the bird species, you get a weird mix of bird species as well.
So it says here 210 islands in total for the Hoopman Abrolhos. That's quite a lot.
It is.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, which is really interesting. And the lovely thing about this is each chapter, it's prefaced by some original writings by an earlier explorer. So, for example, this is Archibald Campbell, who's probably not a well-known explorer, but he's writing in the Australasian newspaper describing a visit to Rat Island in 1890.
Oh, fantastic.
So there you go. So you get that lovely sort of sense of history, as well as all the very clear scientific facts and figures. I guess you won't find travel advice and what the best bakeries are or hotels. It's not that kind of book, exactly.
But books like this are just so fundamental, to putting in knowledge about the state and collecting knowledge about the state, but also for us as travellers. I mean, that's the sort of solid background that we like.
Oh, absolutely. Look, you've got geology, climate, all the different mammals, biological discovery.
Who's published this fine tome?
This is Leschenault Press. It's a local press. I think it's around $60, and as I say, it's just out today. You can go onto the website and order a copy. I wonder if there'll be a local launch. One would think so, wouldn't there? We'll have to, if we discover that information, we'll probably put a little something in our travel pages. But look, my goodness, it's got tables. I mean,
Will is now lost in a book.
I am. Graphs. It's it talks about mining, human impact, island management, ecological restoration.
Of course, a lot of this. Well, it's interesting you mentioned the mining, because a lot of the mining on the islands was guano.
Yes, of course.
Bird.
Yes,
droppings.
Stuff. Yes,
which of course was used widely as ammonia was used as a fertilizer.
I know, indeed.
But also, has been used in explosives as well. And I was just thinking, because if you look back to Cloud Street, Tim Winton's novel, it begins with the guano mining out on the Abrolhos Island.
I'd actually forgotten about that.
Remember
That's
that
amazing.
and the accident?
Right. Well, nice link
out there. So it's, a lot of that is intrinsic to our publishing literary history.
No, you're absolutely right. Yeah, it's. I could have thought. I could have had a crude joke on the tip of my tongue then, but we can't swear on the podcast, so we won't. But anyway, a great reference book. It's something we're going to keep in the office here to use.
Can you give us the title again, please?
The title again is Island Jewels: The Natural History of Western Australia's Islands by Ian Abbott and Andrew A. Burbidge, and it is out today. It's quite a large format book.
Yeah, it's excellent.
Magnificent.
Around 370 pages. Yeah, beautiful work.
Yeah, real reference.
So look, for something completely different, let's go to Penny Thomas telling us about the wine regions in and around Adelaide. Okay, so joining us now on the pod Well Travelled is Penny Thomas. Penny, welcome back to the pod.
Yes. Hi, Will. How are you?
Good, thank you. Now we are talking Adelaide. We're talking wine regions and South Australia, but you're specifically focusing on what's not too far from Adelaide. And as many listeners will know, obviously the Barossa Valley being an obvious example, there's so much to explore there that it's, why would you go anywhere else? It's only, 3 hours from Western Australia where we're recording. and even closer to the East Coast.
Yeah, no, yeah, definitely. That's so true. And what's interesting is Adelaide itself is actually named one of the great wine capitals of the world. So there's 11 sort of cities that are sort of within that 11 sort of group, places like Bordeaux, Porto, and Napa Valley. So to have Adelaide and somewhere in Australia on that list is pretty impressive in itself.
Absolutely.
And it's definitely worth talking about. So I guess there's three sorts of there's three main wine regions within an hour of Adelaide, which I'll be discussing in my story. But I'll talk you through some of those today. So most people will know the Barossa, and then you've also got Adelaide Hills and then McLaren Vale. So in the story that I've put together, we've sort of listed through the top wineries, where to stay, and then also where to eat, because it's not just about wine in those different regions. There's also plenty to eat and also to see. There's lots of sort of beautiful sweeping landscapes that if you're a sort of naturalist as well, you can go bird watching, and there's lots of different sort of botanic gardens as well that you can check out, and it's really beautiful.
Sure.
And a lot of them are sort of the gardens and the natural sort of landscape is very much entwined with the wine producing as well, because they're so close to one another. So it's an interesting place, and because most people from Perth, they can fly right into the Adelaide airport, and if you like, hire a car and be within these regions, which are really world renowned, within sometimes even half an hour. So you could easily do these trips on a weekend away, or spend 4 or 5 days and come
which
back
is
to
amazing.
Perth. But I
mean, it's interesting to me too, that, again, because we're recording from Western Australia, people would also associate wine growing with the Swan Valley, Margaret River, all those sorts of places, but they're very different, aren't they, I guess, if you compare them to what's on offer in Adelaide, in and around Adelaide?
Yeah, certainly. I think around Adelaide, the different wine sort of varieties that you get within such a close proximity is really interesting. I was sort of thinking it's sort of like music as well, or a music genre. You could be into one sort of type, but even if you're not into that type, you might find that at the next cellar door or
right
something
next
like
door,
that.
exactly.
So and I think that a lot of the wine producers are also sort of aware of that too. So they'll help you navigate, if you're into this, you should go to this region. So yeah, it would be a really great place for wine connoisseurs to go, but even people that aren't really experts in wine at all, which, I probably fall into that category, and I love just tasting and seeing what flavours are where, and maybe how the landscape sort of shapes that as well.
Yeah, but also, as you mentioned before too, the natural beauty. So again, if you're not specifically into wine, there's so much to see. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I particularly with the Barossa Valley, I think there's some heritage elements there too, some of the historic buildings and so forth.
Yeah. A lot of the wineries were sort of started in the 1800s. So it's got a lot of history there, and beautiful structures as well.
Yes.
I think there's Chateau Tanunda that looks like it almost looks like a castle. So
wow.
Yeah, there's some really beautiful buildings for architecture sort of buffs, and even people just like to see something historic and impressive that you don't always get in different pockets of Australia. So that's definitely worth having a look for too. And also Adelaide itself is just known for its arts and festivals. So you really could go at any time of year. I mean, the beautiful thing about Australia is that we don't really have proper winters in those types of climates as well.
Sure.
So it's a really great place all year round if you want to taste your way through the wine regions.
Taste your way through the wine regions. I love that. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we'll look forward to reading more about this in the travel pages of the West Australian soon. In the meantime, Penny, thanks for joining us on the Pod Well Travelled.
Thanks, Will.
I don't need to ask either of you gentlemen, presumably, whether you're fans or not.
Oh, yeah. We'll let Geoffrey start. I've got a big connection there, so yeah.
What the Barossa Valley?
The Barossa comes immediately to mind, doesn't it?
Magnificent place. Just outstanding.
And the point Penny makes too is the fact that it's not just about the wine, it's about the history as well, the heritage buildings. It's incredible, isn't it?
It's a magnificent part of the world, and well worth a visit. Definitely.
Yeah, we have a big family wedding in Adelaide in February.
Oh, really?
Actually. Yes, my son is marrying a young lady from Adelaide, so we've got the huge family wedding over there. They're an Adelaide family. So
there'll be lots of South Australian wine being down, presumably.
They're a family of Greek descent, so we Greek heritage, I should say. So we're really looking forward to that, and having her as part of our family, of course, which she is. So,
indeed,
and they are. It's interesting how you get connected to a place, isn't it? Adelaide and South Australia feels very much part of our orbit now,
Indeed.
because we have personal connection. Same with all our travels, you make a friend. Just going back to Air Mauritius, the connection for me, of course, is to Madagascar.
Mm.
I mean, Mauritius is nice, but I'm almost obsessed with Madagascar. And, so to be able to connect back through there is really exciting.
No.
And that's
Good
because
point.
of friendships.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That you have there.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm just reading another new book on the I guess it's the Arab Empire. Earlier when Baghdad was basically the center of the universe, and the book is written through the eyes of all the people, the personalities, and it makes a really big difference. I think when you write history that way, it becomes something really individual
It's
and
human
personal.
connection, isn't it?
Human connection, exactly.
Yeah, always.
Well,
Let's disconnect.
that's the show. We're off for a coffee. So.
I will connect.
As I said, Penny's story is in this Saturday's travel section of the West Australian. My story on
Your
Island
story,
Jewels is
yeah.
also in the same publication. And you can catch both of those stories online at thewest.com.au a little bit later on down the track, as well as a whole heap of other stuff. Anything you want to say? You've got
look,
something
I
you wanted to
just-
mention about...
Air Mauritius.
If I could... Air Mauritius, of course, is
Yeah.
in Saturday.
that's in this Saturday as well.
Yeah, and also we're having a fascinating look at airfares.
Right. The
Yeah.
truth
The truth.
behind
The truth about
airfares.
The truth
Wow.
about airfares.
Oh, shit,
the
we buried-
great expose.
Unmissable. I'm glad
We
you
did well,
mentioned it.
yeah.
We buried the lead in the show.
But-
this should have been the top story.
No, there's almost too much packed into this weekend's travel editions
It's
on
going to be
Saturday
a
and
ripper
Sunday.
edition. It really is.
We could use it almost too much. That's our new slogan. And
Or too much is never enough.
Just to wrap up, I will mention, because we mentioned last week Tour to India,
Yes, indeed.
and that's full. So that filled up. We kind of launched that last Wednesday.
Yeah.
And by the end of the weekend, all 30 spots were full. We've put together a second departure, but sort of without me. So I'll meet the second, straight off the first group. I'll meet the second group. I'll do a kind of an evening to welcome them, something a bit special to welcome them to India.
right.
Spend the first day with them, then I have to leave. But the advantage for the second group will be that, having just been around with our tour manager, they'll know exactly what we expect and what we do with our readers. And so there's a lot of benefit even in being in the second group.
So
we're going to
it-
charge slightly more because I'm not there. So I think there's a premium in there.
So just to clarify, it'll be the same tour manager or the same
The same
company?
tour manager
Right.
straight away.
Yeah, well, that's
So I-
fantastic.
So so they'll just be very familiar with
exactly.
our type of travellers.
Exactly.
What they
Yes.
need and want and expect, and how much information and story. And he'll do a very similar thing in the second trip to the first. So it's still very much my itinerary, and with people really tuned into what our readers like to get out of their trips. But say the first, we had 30 places on the first, and it was full by the end of the weekend. So
Very
That's
impressive. And all our
November next
tours
year,
tend to
tour
fill up quite equally.
they do. They do.
So
And I know that you're working on a very big.
I am something very
I
exciting
can't wait to launch.
coming up in May,
I can't wait to launch.
sometime around May. I'm not going to say anything else, but it's going to be
we
amazing.
have a whole
So-
new sub brand or a whole new line of tours with Will.
Indeed.
Okay.
And again, if you want to pay more, then you can go without me. So
Without
there's always that option. Okay, guys, I think it's coffee time.
coffee
Thanks
time.
again for your company. We'll see you guys next week on the pod. Well travelled.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Will.